In the TNG episode Relics, Scotty crosses over into the next generation after spending the first 70 years of his retirement stuck inside a transporter aboard this thing, the USS Jenolan. This ship is yet another example of the Star Trek art department being resourceful and designing a new ship with minimal resources. This thing in one form or another has appeared on screen more times than you might think. Here, we'll get into all that background info, how it's quietly appeared several times throughout the franchise, and the changes that it underwent with each iteration.
There's also a bunch of other nonsense crammed in here, like how Scotty sounds doing a data impression. It won't disappoint.
If you like the video, the best way to support the channel is by subscribing. Drop a like too if you think it's worth it.
Up your shaft.
Okay, fair enough. Spock may have Star Trek's most famous ears, but we can't forget about the engineers. This is Scotty's doom ship. So, what were the events leading up to Relics? We last saw Captain Montgomery Scott in Star Trek VI, where he was headed out on his final mission with the TOS crew. Kirk, Spock, Bones, this guy. Stuff happened. Then he did a Mr. Kool-Aid through a door.
Oh yeah! Here comes...
And helped thwart the assassination of the Federation president. A few years after that, he was aboard the USS Jenolan en route to his retirement home. The ship comes across an uncharted structure, accidentally triggers its docking procedure, which blows out their engines. The structure's gravity pulls down the Jenolan. Everyone perishes except for Scotty and Franklin. We never see him, but word has it he was a good lad.
He was a good lad.
With minimal life support and few rations, they rig a system where they beam themselves into a repeating cycle with the hope of being rescued one day. This is the Jenolan's introduction, though the story of the ship didn't start here.
It started with a visual effects artist who just felt like making something.
In Star Trek VI, we get this shot of a transport shuttle flying towards space dock. It's called SD-103. We can hear its name in the background communication audio.
Control, this is SD-103. Approach to space dock. Over.
This is the only time it appears in the movie. Usually, an existing shuttlecraft model would be used in a situation like this. There were certainly a few existing models they could have used. Why spend any time or money on a new model for a shot that only lasts 3 seconds, when you have perfectly good ones lying around? As luck would have it, Star Trek VI was pretty light on new models. All the major ships that appeared in the movie were existing ones. Space Dock, the Battlecruiser, Bird of Prey, Excelsior, Enterprise, they were all already built. For this single shot of a shuttle headed towards Space Dock, ILM took it upon themselves to throw together a brand new model.
The film's visual effects art director, Bill George, designed and constructed a 16-inch model over the course of a week. He envisioned a shot inspired by a 2001 Odyssey with the shuttle approaching a space station docking bay. Bill George was a significant contributor to Star Trek visual effects, most notably with his work on the Excelsior and the Bird of Prey models. George and fellow model maker John Goodson designed and constructed a new shuttle over the course of a week. It ended up being about 16.5 inches long, 11 inches wide, and 4 inches tall. Though the model was mostly constructed from scratch, they did use some existing model parts to embellish it. This included the Enterprise D's nacelles. They were painted silver and turned backwards and stuck down here. On the main hull, the curved sides extend past the front and rear of the ship. This is a nod to the OG TOS shuttlecraft. The model turned out so well that they decided to build 2 more, albeit tiny ones, and stuck them down here on the Excelsior. And here's a better shot of them. You can see them tucked away, upside down, and in this open well. This brings us to the episode Relics, produced roughly a year after The Undiscovered Country. The script called for a crashed Starfleet transport vessel, and the SD-103 fit the bill. In order to make it appear as a more substantial starship, the model was given a pair of warp nacelles, and a bridge module taken from a commercially available model set. This is what's called kit bashing, when parts of various model sets are put together to make a new ship, and not to be confused with kit bashing.
Because I don't want to hear another peep out of you until I can get a call off the Devons, so clam up.
The Jenolan's hull was also embellished with windows to make the ship appear larger than the SD-103. They also stuck a bunch of random stuff on it to make the ship appear smaller than something like the Enterprise. According to the official Star Trek Starships collection, the SD-103 was about 26 meters in length. The Jenolan was about 235 meters, which is about the same as a Miranda-class ship. in case you're the type of person who lies awake in bed at night wondering about stuff like this. And just for you, here's the Enterprise. Now go ahead and get some sleep. It's labeled USS Jenolan NCC 2010. It's named after the Jenolan Caves, an ancient cave system outside of Sydney, Australia. Sydney, by the way, is also the name of this class of ship. Jenolan is misspelled on the model, Jenolin, but who's really going to catch that back in 1992? By this point, the ship had been crashed on the outer surface of a Dyson sphere for 75 years. When Scotty finds out he's saved by the Enterprise, he wonders if Captain Kirk had recommissioned the Enterprise A and rescued him.
The Enterprise? I should have known. I bet Jim Kirk himself hauled the old gal out of mothballs to come looking for me.
Like that would happen. The crash of the Jenolan would have taken place after the events of Generations, where Scotty is there when Kirk dies.
Captain Kirk, please respond.
So with Kirk dead, why would Scotty even think that he would be the one to come rescue him? Clearly, you can chalk this one up to, and let's just be real here. This episode being written before Generations was. The model would be put to use again on Deep Space Nine. Early in the series' development, the Jenolan model was considered to be repurposed and used as runabouts for the show. They later decided to design a completely new vessel, but they still used the SD-103 as a starting point. You can see its influence with this early concept art. Recall how the hull extends past the windows? That design characteristic is here. The concept also used the same wedge profile and overall size, though of course this would eventually morph into the runabouts we all know from the show. I have a video solely on runabouts if you want to hear more about that. However, despite being rejected as the runabout, the Jenolan model would still find its way to DS9. In Season 2 it appears as the USS Nash, which ferries Dr. Bashir back to the station. It only appears in 2 brief shots, one of the ship arriving and then one of the ship departing. Though they ended up getting their money's worth out of these, as these shots would become stock footage for whenever some random ship would arrive at the station. This iteration of the ship is flipped upside down, which suggests that this is probably not the same class as Jenolan. When put side by side with Defiant, they look like they could share clothes. You should probably shut the door now so that no one walks in on you comparing starship sizes, but here's the Defiant, here's Scotty's Jenolan, and here's where this USS Nash variant might fit in. Weirdo. While DS9 would be the final appearance of the physical model, the SD-103 would appear about a year later in Star Trek Generations. At the very beginning of the movie, a tiny version of it is used on the Enterprise B dry dock model. It's indiscernible on screen, even when you zoom in and blow out the exposure. However, in this photo of the dry dock model, you can clearly see that you're wasting your time watching this video. You can also see a tiny SD-103. Okay. Quick tangent about the other model in this shot. This dry dock model is moderately different than the one seen launching the refit Enterprise in Star Trek The Motion Picture. That was some 15 years earlier. Well, this model is actually the same one. It appears they added a section down the center top to widen it. This makes sense within the narrative since the Enterprise B is much wider than the OG Enterprise. They also removed the middle row of the side frame, so it's just the 2 angled rows. And this helped better frame the Enterprise B's shorter profile. So yeah, I hope that helps in your journey of amassing useless knowledge. Getting back to the SD-103, it appears again at the end of the movie. In case Generations has faded from your mind, the Enterprise D's saucer crash landed on the planet at some point during the movie, and kicked up a bunch of green dirt. At the end of the movie when the rescue ships arrive, the SD-103 is one of the shuttles taken down to the surface. There are a couple visible. This flyby shot of the shuttle is actually an alternate take from Star Trek VI. Since by this point, the physical model had already been heavily altered, the only way to use the SD-103 was to use old footage. If you look closely, you can still see the silver Enterprise D nacelles on the bottom. There's also a matte painting version of the ship parked on the hull near the main shuttle bay. Outward appearances are important and all, but what really matters is what's inside. In the case of the Jenolan, it's a multi-purpose room that combines the bridge, engineering, and the transporter room. It stays dim for most of the episode, which helped hide its hodgepodge design.
It's usually shot tight to show as little as possible. Here's the widest shot provided in the episode. The transporter's up here, engineering is over there, and the bridge is back there minding its own business. Nothing wrong with being efficient with your living space. It's safe to assume that this was done for storytelling convenience and budgetary constraints. This episode seemed pretty expensive as is, with James Doohan's salary, the new Dyson Sphere model and VFX, the Jenolan model alterations, and the partial reconstruction of the original Enterprise bridge. As far as its multi-purpose room, we spent some time there when Scotty is rescued. When the Jenolan crashed, he and the only other survivor, Franklin, devised a plan to dematerialize themselves and set the transporter to loop indefinitely. Unfortunately, after 75 years, Franklin's pattern degraded to where he couldn't be brought back. Scotty, on the other hand, was A-OK. I mean, on one hand he was A-OK, because on the other, it appears he lost a finger. James Doohan lost his bird finger in World War II. Anyway, here is where that missing finger became canon for Scotty. The only other interior of the ship that we see is this corridor wall when the ship is docked at DS9. It's just an unassuming corridor that evidently has a door that exits directly into space. As mentioned at the beginning of this video, James Doohan's data impression is something every Star Trek fan must hear. An audiobook of Relics was made and was narrated by Scotty himself. He's no stranger to voice work, as he provided many of the voices for the animated series back in the 1970s. Anyway, here we go.
Riker turned to the android second officer, hoping for more information. Mr. Data? Commander, there are no stellar bodies listed at these coordinates in our charts. However, sensor readings indicate the presence of an extremely strong gravitational source in this vicinity. It is directly ahead. It now appeared as round and smooth as a billiard ball. Sensors? I am having difficulty scanning the object. However, it would appear to be at least 200 million kilometers in diameter.
It's safe to assume that James Doohan didn't know anything about data going into this recording session. To the sound engineers in the studio who could have said something, but decided not to, thank you. In 2006, this model was among many that were auctioned off. It went for over 26 grand. Comparatively, the Runabout model, which was used way more and a lot more recognizable, auctioned off for 33 grand. For everyone that supported the channel over on Patreon, I know I haven't put out much content over the past couple years and I'd like to make up for it. I've posted a message over there with all the details. Please head over there to check it out. Thank you for your generosity and support over the years. I've set up a new Patreon page that only accepts contributions on a per video basis. If that's something you'd like to do, thank you, and the link is in the description. For everyone, I'll do my best to continue putting out new content. The channel may slow down, but it won't go away. With that said, I will catch you in the next video.
Up your shaft.